Purple light fractured across Jessica's skin as she pressed her back against the velvet wall, pulse thundering in her throat. Devin's body blocked the exit, his cologne suffocating as he leaned in close. "You don't get to decide when we're done." Her eyes swept the VIP section desperately, past clusters of laughing strangers, past servers carrying glowing cocktails. Then she saw him. A Korean man alone on the leather sofa, perfectly still, while chaos swirled around him, occupying space like he owned the oxygen in it. Navy suit, sharp features, eyes that tracked the room with predatory precision. Without permission from her rational mind, Nancy crossed the space in 4 clicks of her heels and did something she'd never done in 28 careful years. She sat directly on the stranger's lap, and his entire body went still beneath her, not startled, but watchful, calculating. Around them, 2 men in dark suits shifted forward, hands moving to their jackets. Jessica's breath caught. Then she felt it. His hand sliding possessively around her waist, pulling her closer. His lips brushed her ear, voice like silk over steel. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, tell me where you're watching from. If you miss this story, you'll regret it. Don't be the one who scrolls and loses out. Jessica's hands won't stop shaking. The leather seat beneath her is butter soft, probably worth more than her entire wardrobe, but all she can focus on is the way her fingers tremble against her thighs. And Youngmin's driver hasn't said a word since they pulled away from the restaurant. Just drives with the quiet efficiency of someone who's done this 1,000 times before. Picked up girls who talked back, girls who said no, girls who just torched their entire futures in under 60 seconds. The city blurs past the tinted windows, neon signs bleeding into darkness. Jessica's mind keeps replaying the moment she stood up, the weight of every eye in that restaurant crushing down on her shoulders. The way Youngmin barely moved, didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised. That's what terrifies her most. She'd expected anger, maybe humiliation, some flicker of emotion that would confirm he was human, that her refusal had landed. Instead, he'd simply dabbed his mouth with his napkin, set it down with surgical precision, and said 4 words that still echo in her skull. "The car will wait." Not a threat, not a plea, just certainty. The SUV glides to a stop outside her building, a 5th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that's up and coming only in the most optimistic real estate listings. The driver opens her door without a word, and Jessica stumbles out onto the cracked sidewalk, her heels catching on uneven concrete. The vehicle is already pulling away before she reaches the front steps. She's halfway to the entrance when she sees it. A black card, matte finish, sitting dead center on her doormat like it was placed there by surgical hands. No envelope, no note, just the card, sleek and minimal, with a single phone number embossed in silver across the center. The digits catch the harsh hallway light, gleaming like a dare. Jessica's stomach drops as she picks it up with 2 fingers, as if it might burn her. The cardstock is heavy, expensive, the kind of thing that costs more to print than her weekly coffee budget. No name, no company logo, just those numbers, stark and unavoidable. How did he... The door behind her swings open. Lena appears in an oversized sweatshirt and mismatched socks, mid-yawn, holding a bag of chips. "You're back early. Thought you'd be out until..." She freezes. Her eyes lock onto the card in Jessica's hand, and the color drains from her face so fast, Jessica actually takes a step forward. "Lena?" Her roommate's voice comes out barely above a whisper. "Jess, do you know who that man was?" The question hangs in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Jessica opens her mouth, closes it. His name is Youngmin. He's some kind of... Lee Youngmin? Lena's voice cracks on his name. She grabs Jessica's wrist, pulling her inside and slamming the door so hard the frame rattles. The bag of chips hits the floor, forgotten. Oh my God, Jess, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I said no to dinner, and then I left, and..." "You said no?" Lena looks at her like she's grown a second head. "To him?" She starts pacing their tiny living room, hands in her hair. "People don't say no to Lee Youngmin. They don't get the chance. If he wanted dinner with you, that means..." She stops mid-step, turned slowly. That card. He sent you that card? Jessica nods, the weight of it suddenly impossible in her palm. Lena's laugh is hollow, edged with something close to hysteria. Then this isn't over. She meets Jessica's eyes, and there's genuine fear there now. Jess, when men like him want something, she trails off, shaking her head, they don't just walk away. The card seems to pulse in Jessica's hand, that silver number burning itself into her vision. And somewhere across the city, in an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, Jessica knows that young Min is staring at his phone, waiting. Jessica's phone buzzed during the Townsend wedding reception setup, and her stomach dropped before she even saw the name on the screen. Devin. She declined the call, fingers trembling as she shoved the phone back into her blazer pocket. He'd been silent for 3 days, 3 blissful days, where she'd almost convinced herself he'd finally moved on. She should have known better. The corridor outside the main ballroom was empty, and lined with those pretentious floor-to-ceiling mirrors that made the venue look bigger than it actually was. She was checking the placement of the escort card table when she heard footsteps behind her, heavy, deliberate, the kind that meant someone wanted you to know they were coming. "You think you can just ignore me?" The voice turned her blood to ice. Devin closed the distance before she could react, his hand clamping around her wrist with that familiar pressure. Not quite hard enough to bruise, but enough to control. He'd always been good at calibrating his cruelty just below the visible line. "Let go." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "We need to talk." He pulled her deeper into the hallway, away from the ballroom entrance where her co-worker Sarah was probably wondering where she'd disappeared to. And his breath smelled like coffee and rage. "You embarrassed me, Jess. Walking out in the middle of dinner? Making me look like some kind of asshole in front of everyone?" "You are some kind of asshole," she thought, but her throat had closed up the way it always did when he got like this. "I gave you everything," he hissed, stepping closer until her back hit the wall. 4 years. I could have been with anyone, but I chose you. And this is how you repay me?" Her hand found her phone in her pocket. The business card was still folded inside her phone case, the one with just a number written in precise black ink. "For emergencies," young Min had said. "When you're ready." This counted. This definitely counted. She pulled the phone out, and Devin's grip tightened. "Who are you calling? Put that away." But her fingers were already moving, a muscle memory dialing before her conscious mind could second-guess the decision. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Hello, Jessica." Young Min's voice was calm, steady, like he'd been waiting by the phone for 3 days just in case. "He's here," she whispered. "At my work. Devin tried to grab the phone, but she twisted away. "What the hell are you—" "Which entrance?" Young Min cut through Devin's protests like they didn't exist. "Main lobby, 7th and Pine. Don't move, 20 minutes." The line went dead. Devin stared at her, and for the first time, something that looked almost like uncertainty flickered across his face. "Who was that?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because even she wasn't entirely sure what she'd just set in motion. The black SUVs arrived in 18 minutes. And Jessica watched through the lobby's glass doors as 3 vehicles pulled up in perfect formation, like something out of a movie she shouldn't be living. Young Min emerged from the center car, and even from a distance, even through her panic, she noticed the way he moved, purposeful, unhurried, absolutely certain of his place in the world. 2 men flanked him on each side. They didn't look like thugs from some crime drama. They looked like businessmen, expensive suits, calm faces, which somehow made them more terrifying. Devin had gone very, very still beside her. Young Min walked straight through the doors, his eyes finding Jessica immediately before sliding to Devin with an expression that gave away nothing. He crossed the lobby in silence, and his men spreading out in a subtle perimeter that blocked all the exits without seeming to move at all. When Young Min reached them, he didn't acknowledge Jessica. He leaned in close to Devin, close enough that their faces were inches apart, and spoke in a voice so quiet Jessica couldn't make out a single word. But she saw Devin's face drain of color, saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard, saw the exact moment his bravado shattered into something that looked like genuine fear. Then Youngmin stepped back, straightened his already perfect tie, and gestured toward the door. Devin left, not running, that would have drawn attention, but walking with the stiff, jerky movements of someone whose body was overriding every instinct to bolt. The SUVs pulled away. The lobby was quiet again. Young Min finally turned to her, and his expression softened into something almost gentle. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Good." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at her. "I'm leaving 2 men here for the rest of your shift. You won't see them, but they'll be close." "What did you say to him?" Youngmin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing he didn't need to hear. He started to leave, then paused. "Jessica, you have my number now. Use it whenever you need to." As she watched him disappear through the glass doors, one question burned through her mind. What exactly had she just gotten herself into? The restaurant doesn't have a sign. Jessica almost walks past it 3 times before Youngmin's driver appears from a narrow doorway between 2 shuttered shops, bowing slightly as he gestures her inside. The neighborhood is nothing like the glittering downtown where her hotel sits. This is Old Seoul, the kind of place where narrow alleys twist like secrets, and the air smells of sesame oil and history. Inside, the space opens into something impossibly intimate. A single table, paper lanterns casting warm shadows across dark wood. The kind of privacy that costs more than she makes in a month. Youngmin stands when she enters, and the careful distance he usually maintains, that precise, controlled space between them, feels suddenly thinner. "You found it," he says, almost smiling. "Your driver found me wandering like a lost tourist." "I like places people don't stumble into accidentally." He pulls out her chair, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, and Jessica's skin ignites where his fingers were. Yet it means the people here want to be here. The food arrives in waves, each dish more extraordinary than the last. Banchan she can't name, grilled fish that tastes like ocean and smoke, soup so complex she can't identify half the flavors dancing across her tongue. "My mother used to make this," Youngmin says suddenly, gesturing to a clay pot of dark, rich stew. His voice has changed, lost that careful corporate polish. "Not as well as this, but close." Jessica sets down her spoon. He's never mentioned his mother before. "Used to?" "She died when I was 16. He doesn't look at her, just stares at the stew like it holds answers. "Murdered, technically. Wrong place, wrong time. She witnessed something she shouldn't have. Business deal gone bad, men with guns, and no patience for witnesses. My father..." He pauses, jaw tightening. "Yeah, my father was a good man, kind. He ran a small export business, followed every rule, believed the system would protect him, protect us." Youngmin, the system didn't protect her. Now he does look at her, and his eyes are darker than she's ever seen them. The men who killed her walked free. Money bought silence. Power bought witnesses. And my father, he tried. God, he tried. But kindness doesn't stop bullets. Following rules doesn't bring back the dead. Jessica's heart is pounding so hard she's certain he can hear it. He died 2 years later. Heartbreak, the doctor said. I say he died the same night she did. He just took longer to stop breathing. Youngmin refills her glass with steady hands that betray nothing. I was 18, alone, and I made a promise at his funeral. What promise? That no one I loved would ever be helpless again. His gaze locks onto hers, intense and absolutely unwavering. I built everything. Every company. Every connection. Every carefully constructed piece of what people call my empire on that single rule. Power isn't about greed, Jessica. It's about protection. It's about making sure that when danger comes, you're the most dangerous thing in the room. She should be afraid. Every rational part of her brain is screaming that this man just confessed to building a criminal empire on revenge, that she's sitting across from someone who measures relationships in terms of power and protection, that this is exactly the kind of dangerous attachment her editor warned her about. Instead, she reaches across the table and takes his hand, and his fingers close around hers like he's been waiting for permission. "Is that why you brought me here?" Her voice comes out softer than she intended. "To tell me what I'm walking into?" "I brought you here," Young Min says quietly, "because I'm tired of pretending I don't want you in every room I enter, and because you deserve to know exactly who you're falling for before you fall too far." Too late, Jessica thinks, even as her pulse races. I'm already falling. "And if I'm not afraid?" Something shifts in his expression, heat and hunger, and something almost like relief. "Then we're both in trouble." The man was already bleeding when they dragged him in. Jessica pressed herself against the leather seat of Young Min's car, watching through tinted windows as two of his men hauled someone across the warehouse parking lot. The man's shirt was torn, one eye swollen shut. He wasn't fighting anymore, just stumbling forward like a puppet with cut strings. "Stay here." Young Min's voice was quiet, calm, the same tone he'd used when ordering her coffee that morning. She should have nodded, should have looked away. Instead, she heard herself say, "I want to see." His eyes found hers in the rearview mirror, dark and unreadable. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he opened his door. The warehouse smelled like rust and old concrete. Jessica followed Young Min inside, her heels clicking too loud against the floor, announcing her presence like a warning bell she couldn't silence. The men had thrown the bleeding man into a metal chair. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with the desperate eyes of someone who'd bet everything on the wrong hand. And Young Min walked forward slowly, deliberately. His footsteps echoed. "Do you know why you're here, Min Sok?" The man, Min Sok, spat blood onto the concrete. "I didn't. Don't." Young Min's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Don't insult me with lies." One of his men placed something on the table beside the chair. A gun. Black metal catching the dim warehouse lights. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. Min Seok saw it too. His whole body went rigid. "You stole from me," Young Min said, circling the chair like a shark scenting blood in the water. 50 million won. You thought I wouldn't notice. Thought you could hide behind Lee's organization, play both sides, pocket the difference. I'll pay it back. With what? Young Min stopped in front of him. You spent it. Gambling debts, wasn't it? The same debts that made you stupid enough to think betraying me was a solution. Jessica couldn't look away, couldn't move. She'd known what Young Min was, known it in theory, in whispered warnings from her friends, in the careful way people stepped aside when he entered a room. But knowing and seeing were different things entirely. Young Min picked up the gun. Min Seok's breathing turned ragged, panicked. Please, I have a daughter. I know. Young Min's voice was almost gentle. She's 7. Goes to Hanbit Elementary. Her mother picks her up every day at 3:15. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jessica felt sick. I'm going to give you a choice, Young Min continued, setting the gun back down with a soft click that seemed to echo forever. You leave Seoul. Tonight. You take your family and you disappear. Yet you don't come back. You don't contact anyone from the old life. You become a ghost. Min Seok's one good eye went wide. And if I don't? Young Min smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then I stopped being merciful. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jessica watched Min Seok's face cycle through fear, calculation, desperate hope. She knew what she should feel. Horror, disgust, the urge to run. But underneath all of that was something else. Something that whispered, he's protecting what's his, and this is what power looks like, and you're on the winning side. I'll go, Min Seok finally whispered. Tonight, I swear. Young Min nodded once. His men pulled Min Seok from the chair, dragged him toward a side door. The man was crying now, shoulders shaking with something between relief and shame. Then they were alone. And Young Min turned to face her, and Jessica saw it clearly for the first time, the cold calculation in his eyes, the absolute certainty of someone who'd drawn lines in blood and never flinched. He was waiting for her reaction, testing her. She should have been terrified, should have demanded he take her home, should have blocked his number and pretended this night never happened. Instead, she stepped closer. "Would you have killed him?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Young Min studied her face like he was reading a language only he understood. "If I had to." "And the daughter?" "I don't hurt children, Jessica." Something flickered in his expression. Offense, maybe, that she'd even asked. But he didn't need to know that. She should have felt relief, should have clung to that single shred of humanity like a lifeline. But all she could think about was the gun on the table, and the way her pulse had quickened when he'd picked it up, not with fear, but with something infinitely more dangerous. Young Min moved closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, close enough to smell his cologne mixing with the warehouse's metallic air. "Still want to see my world?" he asked softly. Jessica met his eyes and realized with a shock of clarity that terrified her more than anything else that night. She wasn't afraid of what he was capable of. She was afraid of how much she wanted to stay anyway. Jessica's hands were still shaking when they pulled up to the penthouse. She'd told herself she'd ask him to drop her off at her apartment, that witnessing what she'd seen in that warehouse, the way Young Min's voice had gone quiet and lethal. The way grown men had flinched at his silence should have been her exit, her clean break from whatever dangerous thing this was becoming. But when he'd turned to her in the back seat, eyes searching her face for judgment or fear or disgust, she'd only whispered, "Take me with you." Now she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, Lake Michigan. Stretching black and infinite below, lights from the city reflected like fallen stars on the water. She heard him pour 2 glasses of something, whiskey maybe, and the soft clink as he set one beside her on the windowsill. "You can leave," he said quietly. "I'll have someone drive you home. No questions." She picked up the glass. "What if I don't want to leave?" The silence between them felt heavier than anything she'd witnessed tonight. Young Min moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, but he didn't touch her. He never pushed. That was the cruelest part. He always gave her the choice, even when her heart had already made it. "Then we talk," he said. So they did. They sank onto the leather sofa as midnight bled into 1 a.m., then 2. Jessica found herself telling him things she'd never said aloud, how she'd been planning other people's perfect moments for 5 years while her own life stayed frozen in place, how her boss took credit for her ideas, how she dreamed of having her own firm, her own name on the door, but the fear of failing kept her trapped in someone else's vision. "You won't fail," Young Min said, and the certainty in his voice made her chest ache. "You don't know that." "I know you." He turned to face her fully, and the vulnerability in his expression caught her off guard. "I know what it looks like when someone's hungry for more. I recognize it because I've been hungry my whole life." She set down her glass, emboldened by exhaustion and whiskey and the strange intimacy of 3 a.m. confessions. "Is that what tonight was about? Staying hungry?" He didn't flinch from the question. "Tonight was about protecting what's mine, but not the way you think." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "I am legitimizing parts of the business. Real estate, investments, legal operations. It takes time, and it's dangerous because there are people who don't want me to evolve, who need me to stay exactly what I was. And what were you? A weapon, a tool, someone else's monster." His jaw tightened. "I'm building something different now. Something that'll outlast the blood." Jessica's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have been running. Instead, she reached out and touched his hand. "Why tell me this?" Young Min looked at their joined hands like he was memorizing them. "Because everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, protection, permission." He met her eyes, and the raw honesty there stole her breath. "But you looked at me in that warehouse like you were trying to decide if I was worth saving, not using. Saving." "I don't want to own you, Jessica," he continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Everyone in my life, they want to own me or be owned by me. But you." He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm like they held answers. I want to free you, help you build what you're meant to build, and maybe... He stopped. Ish swallowed hard. Maybe you'll choose to stay anyway. The words hung between them, fragile and terrifying and impossibly beautiful. Jessica didn't think. She leaned in and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like testing the temperature of water that might burn. But then his hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite the violence those hands were capable of, and she melted into him. The kiss deepened, turned desperate, like they were both trying to hold on to something precious before the inevitable sunrise ripped it away. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, breathing ragged, Youngmin's thumb brushed her cheekbone. Stay tonight, he whispered. Jessica nodded, unable to speak past the emotion choking her throat. He led her to the bedroom, and they fell asleep tangled together on top of the covers, as still fully clothed, holding each other like lifelines in a storm. Jessica woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Youngmin's phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. She felt him tense beside her, saw the way his expression shifted from soft to sharp as he read the screen. What is it? She asked. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that might have been fear in his eyes. Your boss, he said quietly. She knows you were with me last night, and she's making it a problem. The knock came at 6 a.m., sharp and insistent, the kind that doesn't care if you're awake. Jessica stood frozen in her kitchen, coffee mug halfway to her lips. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in a charcoal blazer, badge already out, eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by anything. Mom, Jessica Morris, FBI. I need 5 minutes of your time. Shit. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the deadbolt. The woman stepped inside with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, taking in the apartment in one sweep, the half-packed boxes still stacked against the wall from when she'd been planning to leave, the expensive coffee maker that didn't match the worn furniture, the framed photo of her and Devin she'd flipped face down weeks ago. Agent Sarah Callahan. She didn't offer her hand. Mind if I sit? Jessica gestured to the couch, her throat tight. Callahan settled in like she owned the place, pulling out a manila folder that looked far too thick for comfort. I'm going to be direct with you, Ms. Morris, because I think you're smart enough to appreciate directness. Callahan opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos. Jessica's stomach dropped. There she was, entering Youngmin's building, leaving his restaurant, in his car. We've been watching Park Youngmin for 18 months. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering. We know about his investment portfolios, his shell companies, his very talented accountant who makes all those dirty numbers look clean. The last photo landed on the coffee table between them. Jessica stared at her own face, caught mid-laugh outside some wine bar she barely remembered, Youngmin's hand on the small of her back. We know about you too. Jessica's voice came out smaller than she wanted. I haven't done anything illegal. Haven't you? Callahan leaned forward, and Jessica caught the faint scent of cigarette smoke clinging to her blazer. You've been accepting gifts from a man under federal investigation. Expensive gifts. You've been present at meetings where business was discussed. You've been, how do I put this delicately, intimately involved with someone who's going to prison for a very long time. I didn't know. Save it. Callahan's tone wasn't unkind, just tired. You're not the first woman who fell for a guy with a dark side, but here's where it gets interesting. She pulled out another document, and Jessica felt the air leave her lungs. Your ex-boyfriend, Devin Matthews, filed a police report 2 days ago, claims he was assaulted by 2 of Park's associates, says they threatened him, told him to stay away from you, says he feared for his life. Jessica's mind raced. Devin had shown up at her apartment last week, desperate and high, begging her to take him back. As she'd called Youngmin, panicked and ashamed. The next day, Devin was gone. She'd been relieved. She hadn't asked questions. She should have asked questions. Did they? Jessica started, but Callahan cut her off with a look. Between you and me, I think your ex is a scumbag looking for a payday. His story has more holes than Swiss cheese, and his credibility is somewhere between pathological liar and career criminal. Callahan paused. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he gave us leverage, and now I'm here to offer you the same thing I offer everyone in your position." Jessica's hands were shaking. She gripped them together in her lap. "Cooperate," Callahan said simply. "Tell us everything you know about Park's business operations. Testify if we need you. Help us put him away, and you walk. Clean slate. No charges." She let that hang in the air for a moment. "Or don't. Stay loyal. And when we bring him down, and we will bring him down, you go too. Conspiracy, aiding and abetting, accessory after the fact. You're 26 years old, Ms. Morris. Do you really want to spend your 30s in federal prison?" The apartment felt impossibly small. Jessica thought of Young Min's hands on her face, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world, the way he'd promised to protect her, but he couldn't protect her from this. "How long do I have?" Jessica whispered. Callahan stood, leaving her card on the table. 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you got in over your head. But that's not going to matter to a jury." The door clicked shut, and Jessica was alone with her reflection in the darkened TV screen and a choice that would destroy everything either way. Her phone buzzed. Young Min's name lit up the screen. "Good morning, beautiful. Dinner tonight?" She stared at the message until her vision blurred. Jessica's hands were shaking when she knocked on Young Min's office door at 11 p.m. She'd rehearsed the speech 12 times, practiced the questions, told herself she'd stay calm, rational, collected. But the moment he opened the door, hair disheveled, tie loosened, those dark eyes meeting hers with something that looked like relief, everything she'd prepared evaporated. "You need to tell me the truth," she said. "All of it." He stepped aside without a word. Let her in. Closed the door. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, and Jessica watched him pour 2 glasses of whiskey with hands that didn't shake at all. That's what terrified her most. His steadiness. His certainty, like he'd been waiting for this conversation for months. "Devin's car," she started, her voice cracking. "His bank accounts. The job offer in Seattle that suddenly disappeared. His new girlfriend who stopped answering his calls." She took the glass he offered, but didn't drink. "That was you." It wasn't a question. "Yes." No hesitation, no justification, just the brutal simplicity of truth. Jessica's chest tightened. "What did you do?" Young Min sat on the edge of his desk, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost vulnerable. Almost. "I made some calls, pulled some strings, and his car had an unfortunate accident. Nothing that hurt him, just expensive enough to be inconvenient. His bank accounts had some irregularities flagged. Took him weeks to sort out. The girlfriend received a message from a concerned party about his habits." He paused. "The job in Seattle? That company owes me a favor." Jesus Christ. Jessica set the glass down before she dropped it. "You erased him." "I removed an obstacle." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was describing a business transaction. "Devin was toxic. He manipulated you, gaslit you, made you doubt your own reality for 2 years. When you finally left, he tried to worm his way back, so I made sure he couldn't." "That's not your decision to make." "You're right." He met her eyes, unflinching. "But I made it anyway." The admission hung in the air, and heavy and irrevocable. Jessica wanted to scream at him, to tell him he'd crossed a line so far beyond acceptable she couldn't even see it anymore. But another part of her, the part she didn't want to acknowledge, felt a dark, twisted sense of safety. Devin was gone, really gone. Not just physically, but completely erased from her life in a way she could never have managed alone. "What else?" she whispered. "What else have you done?" Young Min studied her for a long moment, and she saw him making a calculation, deciding how much truth she could handle, how much he was willing to give. "Everything," he said finally. "The bribes to city officials for zoning approvals, the quiet intimidation of competitors who bid against us, the money that changes hands in dark parking lots to make problems disappear." He took a slow sip of whiskey. And I've built an empire on fear and loyalty, Jessica. People respect me because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. That's the world I operate in. That's who I am. She felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I'm ruthless. He set his glass down, stood, took a step toward her. I'm telling you that in everyone else's story, the competitors I've crushed, the people I've paid off, the man whose life I systematically dismantled, I'm the villain. Absolutely and without question. Jessica's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. But in yours? Young Min's voice dropped, rough and raw. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who saw you falling apart and didn't look away. I'm the one who protected you when you couldn't protect yourself. And even if you never asked me to. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. I'd do it all again, Jessica, every single thing, and I wouldn't lose a minute of sleep. She should run. She should report him. She should be horrified. Instead, she whispered, "What am I supposed to do with that?" Young Min's expression shifted into something dangerous, something hungry. That depends. Are you asking as my assistant? His hand came up, fingers barely grazing her jaw. Or as the woman who's been sleeping in my bed. Essica's reflection stared back at her from the elevator's mirrored walls, black silk gown, hair swept up, diamond earrings borrowed from a collection she'd never return. She looked like power, felt like a weapon. The ballroom doors opened to a symphony of wealth, crystal chandeliers throwing fractured light across marble floors, champagne flutes catching gold, laughter that cost 6 figures to manufacture. Young Min stood at the center of it all, a constellation everyone else orbited around. Senators, tech moguls, women whose jewelry could fund small nations. His smile never reached his eyes, but his handshake was warm enough to make them forget. He saw her immediately. The room didn't disappear. That only happened in movies, but something in his posture shifted, a lock tumbling into place. "Ms. Chen!" Callahan's voice cut through the ambient noise like a scalpel. He'd materialized beside her, FBI issue suit, somehow making him invisible among the tuxedos. Last chance. She'd known this was coming, had rehearsed responses during the cab ride, in the shower that morning, lying awake at 3 a.m. staring at her ceiling. None of them felt adequate now. "I can have you in a safe house by midnight," Callahan continued, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "New identity, protection. A life that doesn't end with you in witness protection, or worse." He paused, and something almost human flickered across his face. "You're not like him, Jessica. You don't have to become what he is." Across the room, Young Min was watching. Not obviously, he was mid-conversation with a man she recognized from cable news, but she felt the weight of his attention like gravity. He wasn't smiling now, just waiting, trusting her to make the choice that would either save them both or destroy everything they'd built. The thing about trust was that it demanded trust in return, yet a mutual freefall with no guarantee of landing. "What if I already am?" Jessica heard herself say. The words surprised her. Their honesty, their finality. Callahan's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be having a very different conversation soon." Maybe. She adjusted her clutch, felt the familiar weight of her phone inside. Every text message on it could be evidence. Every photo. A confession. But not tonight. She started to walk away, but Callahan caught her wrist. Gentle, but firm. "He's using you, you know that, right? Whatever you think this is, partnership, romance, some modern Bonnie and Clyde fantasy, to him, you're leverage, an asset." Jessica looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Agent James Callahan, 15 years with the Bureau, decorated for exceptional service, and now trying to save a woman who'd stopped wanting to be saved somewhere around the third laundered million. "I don't need protection anymore," she said quietly, pulling her wrist free. "I need a partner." His expression fractured, disappointment, resignation, something that might have been pity. "Then I guess we're done here." "I guess we are." She walked away before he could say anything else, before she could second-guess the decision that felt simultaneously like liberation and damnation. Her heels clicked against marble, each step carrying her further from the woman she'd been 6 months ago. That woman would have taken the deal, would have run. Young Min's conversation partner had drifted away by the time she reached him. He turned to face her fully, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The ballroom swirled around them. Deals being made, futures being traded, money changing hands in handshakes, and whispered promises. "You look beautiful," he said finally. "We need to talk," Jessica replied. "Callahan knows. More than we thought." Young Min's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that could have been reassurance or possession. "Then I suppose," he said, leading her toward the terrace doors, "it's time we made our own move." Chapter 9. The Empire They Built Together. Jessica stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Young Min's penthouse, watching the Chicago skyline bleed orange and pink as the sun dipped below Lake Michigan. 6 months had passed since that night in the alley. 6 months since she'd chosen chaos over comfort, danger over safety, him over everything she'd thought she wanted. "Come here," Young Min called from behind her. She turned to find him standing at the rooftop access door, one hand extended, that familiar half-smile playing at his lips, the one that still made her stomach flip despite everything they'd been through together. "It's freezing up there," she protested, but she was already moving toward him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Trust me." 2 words that once would have terrified her. Now they felt like coming home. The rooftop garden glittered with thousands of string lights, transforming the concrete jungle into something out of a dream. Jessica's breath caught, not from the cold, but from the deliberate beauty of it all. Young Min had never been a man of grand romantic gestures. This was different. "What is this?" she whispered. He guided her to the center of the rooftop, where the city sprawled before them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and Young Min reached up to tuck a strand behind her ear, his touch gentle, despite the calluses that mapped his knuckles. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here?" he asked. "You told me you wanted to build something that mattered." "I remember." She'd been drunk on expensive wine and possibility, convinced she could change him, save him, fix whatever was broken inside both of them. "You were wrong about something, though." His dark eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "You didn't need to build anything. You needed to destroy everything first." He was right. The Jessica who'd walked into Cypher 6 months ago, that desperate, people-pleasing girl who'd buried herself in toxic relationships and dead-end dreams, she was gone, burned away. What remained was sharper, hungrier, more alive than she'd ever been. Young Min's real estate portfolio was growing daily now, legitimate properties replacing the shadowy operations that had once funded his empire. The tech investments were paying off. The hospitality ventures, restaurants, hotels, exclusive clubs were booming under his direction. And Jessica? She ran the events division like she'd been born to it, booking clients that made her former employers weep with envy, orchestrating experiences that became the stuff of Chicago legend. She wasn't his assistant. She wasn't his kept woman or his pretty accessory. She was his equal, his co-conspirator, his queen. "Jessica," Young Min's voice dropped lower, rougher. He reached into his jacket pocket, and her heart stopped. "I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you run if you knew all of it, but you—" His jaw clenched, emotion flickering across his usually controlled features. "You looked at the worst parts of me and didn't flinch. You matched me. Hell, you surpassed me." The small velvet box in his hand caught the light. "I don't believe in fairy tales," he continued, dropping to one knee on the cold concrete. "I don't believe in redemption or second chances or any of that bullshit. But I believe in you, in this, in what we've built together." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was nothing like she would have expected. Not ostentatious or gaudy, but elegant, dangerous, perfect. A black diamond surrounded by smaller white stones, like a dark star in a constellation. "Marry me, not because I've changed, but because you did. The city hummed below them, oblivious to the moment unfolding above. Jessica looked at the ring, at the man offering it, at the empire they'd carved from blood and ambition and something that felt dangerously close to love. Yes, she breathed. Youngmin slid the ring onto her finger, then stood, pulling her against him with a possessiveness that still made her pulse race. His lips found hers, and Chicago disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to his, and breathing him in, smoke and expensive cologne and the metallic edge of danger that never quite left him. "You saved me too, you know," he whispered against her mouth. Jessica smiled, fierce and certain. "I know." But as his arms tightened around her and the wind howled across the rooftop, neither of them noticed the black car that had been parked across the street for the past hour, or the figure inside, watching, waiting. Some debts, after all, can never be fully erased. Sometimes the life you're clinging to is the very thing holding you back. Jessica had to let go of everything safe and familiar before she could discover who she truly was. Transformation requires destruction first. Know your worth and never settle for being someone's accessory. Jessica refused to be kept, controlled, or diminished. She demanded partnership, equality, and respect, and she got it because she believed she deserved it. The right partnership doesn't complete you. It challenges you to become more. Youngmin didn't save Jessica, and she didn't save him. They pushed each other to evolve, to build something bigger than either could create alone. Redemption isn't about erasing your past. It's about choosing a different future. Youngmin didn't become a saint, but he chose to channel his ambition into something legitimate, proving that change doesn't mean becoming someone else entirely. Thank you for watching Jessica's journey from lost to legendary. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments what moment hit you hardest. And remember, you're always one bold choice away from a completely different life. See you in the next video.